You're desperate to find out more about Act 4, Scene 3 of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. You're in the right place, Schofield on Shakespeare.
Simili a degli eroi, abbiamo il cuore a strisce, portaci dove vuoi, verso le tue conquiste. Dove tu arriverai sarà la storia di tutti noi, solo chi corre può.
Familiar bleats, you need to have read Act 4, Scene 3 and thought about it before watching this video. If you haven't done that, go and do that now.
Time for my brief summary of a very brief scene. First up, we meet Sebastian for the 4th time. He's in much better spirits compared to Act 2 Scene 1, Act 3 Scene 3 and Act 4 Scene 1, when he was battling low moods, fending off the advances of an unscrupulous sailor, only joking, and left infuriated by people keen to either vex or fight with him. He relishes the fresh air and beautiful weather, and marvels at the jewel Olivia has given him. Of course, everything is a little strange for him, and he is puzzled that he hasn't been able to get hold of loyal lapdog Antonio in order to talk things through with him. Nonetheless, he recognises that spending time with an extremely wealthy, beautiful woman, albeit currently a stranger, might have its advantages, and so he decides to take things easy and go along with things. After all, in her other role as leader of her household, she seems highly competent, although the audience will be aware that she has taken her eye off the ball with the plot against Malvolio. Olivia herself skips on stage, accompanied by a whisked-out-of-nowhere priest. She informs Sebastian that they should get married at once, but he can keep things quiet until he's ready to proclaim the good news across Illyria. Sebastian thinks, hey, why the hell not? Time for you to answer 2 questions, dear viewers and subscribers. The more you independently write and think, the better. This video will resume in 5 seconds' time, so press pause now to jot down your responses. Question 1. Porter Williams Jr. in Mistakes in Twelfth Night and Their Resolution describes the marriage of Olivia and Sebastian as the happiest and most important error in the play. Explain why, including quotations from the scene in your response. What an interesting question, and one which on the face of it seems bizarre. How can a woman's mistaken marriage to a complete stranger, albeit the twin brother to someone she has rapidly and incomprehensibly grown obsessed with, be one of the happiest moments in the play? Let's probe. Well, there's no doubt that this scene feels extraordinarily positive, and there is also a kind of synergy implied by Sebastian's opening lines and the rhyming couplet used by Olivia at the end of the scene. Okay, it's not quite the shared sonnet of Act 1, Scene 5 of Romeo and Juliet, but the joint, independent references to sparkling, shimmering light seems auspicious, in the same way that in Macbeth, the appalling weather should really ring alarm bells. I think it's also important to note that Sebastian is fully acquiescent with the plan. It is not just a case of Olivia having bullied a bewildered, dazed young man into a lifetime commitment. He doesn't need to come out and say that he will permanently be loyal and faithful to Olivia. Just a nod of the head and faithful plodding towards the church would have been sufficient for that jealous and too doubtful bride-to-be. But the fact he does display a degree of calm resoluteness may suggest the pair have a chance of making a happy success out of this strange, inspired by an error, marriage. But of course, the question calls for a degree of comparison. There are a number of errors made in this play. Is this really the happiest one, at least in the play so far? Well, I think probably yes. Malvolio makes the most obvious error in thinking that Olivia loves him, As a consequence of this error, he is bound in darkness and mocked for being mad. Yes, the scene in which he reads Mariah's delicious forgery is very funny, but there's no possible way we can describe the whole setup as happy. What other errors are there? Well, there is Feste, Sir Andrew and Sir Toby taking Sebastian for Cesario in Act 4, Scene 1. Again, this causes amusement for the audience, but frustration and violence predominate rather than happiness. In Act 3, Scene 4, Antonio's error in assuming that Viola is Sebastian provokes some splendidly tragic speeches, albeit those which on reflection brings Viola's heart some unexpected balm. And to return to Act 4, Scene 3, Olivia marrying Sebastian thinking that he is Cesario has the potential to have the happiest long-term consequences. And if Sebastian has apparently managed to adapt so rapidly to strange new circumstances, then perhaps there is no reason why Olivia will not be able to do this in due course herself when she establishes the truth of what has happened. In Porter Williams Jr.'s essay, he goes on to expand upon his claim by suggesting that open-hearted spontaneity is rewarded within Shakespeare's comedies, whereas those who are repressed, preening and calculating, i.e. Malvolio, are left isolated. So is Olivia unconsciously recognising a kindred spirit when battling jealousy and doubt, and heading off to the church wondering whether Cesario is going to return to his old habits of warding off her advances and pleading the case for Orsino instead? Well, typically in Shakespeare, he leaves things ambiguous. In Act 5, Scene 1, it is Sebastian who reassures blithely once the error has been cleared up, and Olivia who says nothing, at least on this topic. It's tempting to deviate briefly to Measure for Measure, in which Duke Vincencio declares that he's going to marry, without any warning or courtship, the previous nun-in-training, Isabella. Isabella says nothing to or about this, and in most productions she looks far from happy. In Twelfth Night the situation is different, of course. The pair are already married, and it was the woman who railroaded the man rather than vice versa, although with the agreement of the other party. But Olivia's silence when enlightened in Act 5, Scene 1 does allow directors and actors at least the possibility of suggesting that she feels embarrassed about her error, and possibly more. Although she manages to get her composure back sufficiently to declare that she will host a joint wedding party for both herself and Sebastian and Orsino and Viola.
Question 2 time. To what extent do you see Olivia as a feminist character? Include quotations from the scene in your response. The term feminist has clearly evolved over the centuries. However, let's keep this relatively simple. In my response, I will refer to the Oxford English Dictionary definition, which states:
a feminist is an advocate or supporter of the rights of women. The most obvious point in favour of this argument is that Olivia does all the running in her relationship with, inverted commas, Cesario. She pursues the one she fancies like mad. She declares her feelings. And she proposes marriage. It even has the priest at hand so that it can take place immediately. Even in today's world, it is generally expected that men should take the lead with the wooing process. And Helena's line from A Midsummer Night's Dream implies that this was certainly the case in Elizabethan times. So there's an argument that the way in which Olivia dominates the courtship process positions her as a feminist trailblazer. Women should be able to choose their own partners and make explicit their own feelings. Irrespective of convention, irrespective of men preferring to take the lead, as implied by Juliet's words in Romeo and Juliet. Olivia also seems a woman who is very much in control of her household. She doesn't need a man to run things. She is more than capable herself. Hence Sir Toby's nervous comment in Act 4, Scene 2. and Sebastian's balanced judgment at the beginning of this scene. So in some ways Olivia can be seen as a feminist character, but in other ways she isn't. Firstly, her later actions in the play seem to suggest that she invented the ludicrous idea of a 7-year mourning term purely to try to fend off Orsino's dogged advances. A theory supported by Ruth Nevo within her essay Nature's Bias. Is there any need for a strong, independent woman to invent such a grotesque, disproportionate scenario? She could simply send a message to Orsino which stated no means no, or perhaps to adopt more modern parlance, leave means leave. Moreover, the way in which she fails to mention this brother at all in the play doesn't do her any credit, and might leave some audience members wondering about the extent to which she was ever that bothered by him. I also wonder whether there are some moments during her pursuit of Cesario where she comes across, frankly, as rather too desperate. Take her imagery in Act 1, Scene 3, in which she melodramatically attempts to upbraid Cesario for exposing her honour, the same Cesario Viola who has always been courteous and kind, irrespective of the circumstances. So rather than out Olivia as a trailblazing feminist, I would prefer to see her as a person who ends up being afflicted by, to quote the revised title of Catherine Davies's 2004 novel, The Madness of Love, which can, of course, affect men and women equally. In Act 5, Scene 1, Olivia explains that she forgot about Malvolio's supposed madness due to a most extracting frenzy of mine own. Her extraordinarily passionate feelings of love for Cesario left her unable to think clearly of anything else and temporarily caused her to lose control. Hers was never a calculated pursuit. How could it be for someone who first appeared ostensibly as a mere page? But an impulse stronger than reason took over, an impulse which railroaded conventions of courtship. This impulse has ultimately bound her to a man she barely knows. But to return to Porter Williams Jr., whom I referenced in question 1, the generous impulses of open natures are the surest way to happiness. A willingness to love and to risk all deserve to be rewarded within the beneficent world of a Shakespearean comedy.
This has been a Schofield on Shakespeare production, beseeching you to think more closely about Act 4, Scene 3 of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Many thanks for watching.